Hey everyone! Ready to dive deep into the world of Hidden? Released on March 13, 2015. This film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. Hidden, released on March 13, 2015, is one of those films that sneaks up on you, gripping your mind with its tension and psychological complexity. Directed by the Duffer Brothers, who would later go on to create the phenomenon Stranger Things, Hidden is a tightly wound thriller that takes a refreshingly minimalist approach to horror. This isn't the kind of movie that thrives on cheap jump scares or gratuitous violence. Instead, it draws you into a world of isolation, fear, and survival, all set within the confines of a small underground shelter. The premise seems simple, but the execution is anything but. The Duffer Brothers craft a film that's both emotionally charged and intellectually gripping, a unique exploration of human resilience under extraordinary stress. What makes Hidden so compelling is its remarkable ability to create an atmosphere of anxiety and claustrophobia. From the very beginning, the film traps you with its characters, forcing you to experience the same feeling of confinement they do. A family, Ray, Claire, and their young daughter Zoe, are trapped in an underground shelter, hiding from an unknown threat. The shelter, a seemingly safe haven, is small, dark, and devoid of life beyond the family unit. Yet, the feeling of safety is fleeting. The world above is gone, and all they can do is wait for some semblance of normality to return, if it ever does. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Hidden is not your average thriller. It's a slow-burn film, where tension builds with each passing moment, and every decision, every movement made by the family feels weighted with the gravitas of life-or-death consequences. The world outside is constantly hinted at but never fully revealed, and this constant uncertainty becomes a character in itself. There's an unseen monster out there, but it's not just the physical threat that keeps the audience on edge. It's the psychological toll that fear and isolation take on the family. This is where Hidden excels. The Duffer Brothers don't rely on overt explanations or even the visual spectacle of the creature. Instead, they let fear manifest in the subtleties of human behavior. The family is introduced in an almost painfully intimate way. Ray, played by Alexander Skarsgård, is a protective father whose sole mission is to keep his family safe. He's a man who's been through something devastating, and while he maintains a calm exterior, there's a constant undercurrent of dread that shapes his every action. Claire, played by Andrea Riseborough, is his wife, a woman whose strength is tempered by her growing sense of helplessness. Their daughter, Zoe, Emily Allen Lind, is the innocent at the center of it all, her curiosity and need for answers providing both hope and tension in equal measure. Each of these characters feels authentic, their bond believable, and their vulnerabilities exposed in a way that makes them incredibly relatable. You care about them immediately, and that emotional connection makes the escalating danger even more intense. Hidden is also a film about secrets, what we choose to hide from one another and what we try to protect others from. Ray's protective instincts are palpable, but as the film progresses, we see that his desire to shield his family may be causing more harm than good. Claire, in turn, struggles with the reality that the man she loves is hiding things from her, and the rift between them begins to widen as the stress of their situation grows. The suspense comes not only from the external threat but from the emotional and psychological unraveling of the characters. Their relationship becomes a microcosm of the larger themes of trust, survival, and sacrifice that permeate the film. The threat outside the shelter is, at first, only hinted at through sounds, shadows, and fleeting glimpses. The world above has been ravaged by some kind of outbreak, and the family's shelter is their only refuge. But even within this haven, there is no safety. The constant tension of waiting for the worst to happen, of hearing strange noises from above and fearing that something is watching them, creates a nail-biting atmosphere. The Duffer Brothers masterfully play with sound and visuals to keep us on edge, using darkness, silence, and subtle movements to evoke a constant sense of unease. It's not just what we see that scares us, it's what we don't. The pacing of the film is deliberate, with long stretches of quiet moments that allow the dread to settle in before things ramp up. As Ray, Claire, and Zoe move through their daily lives, every action seems to carry a greater weight, and the quiet moments between them are laden with unspoken tension. The camera lingers on their faces, capturing the subtle shifts in their emotions: fear, confusion, and, at times, desperation. These small details make the film feel incredibly immersive, pulling you further into the family's world and their struggle to survive. Then, in a series of moments that force the audience to rethink everything they've seen, the plot begins to twist and reveal itself. Just when you think you've figured out what's happening, the film throws a curveball that changes everything. The truth about the family's situation is far more complex than we initially realized, and the real horror of the film isn't just the external threat. It's the realization that things are much worse than they first appeared. The twists are masterfully executed, pulling the rug out from under the audience in a way that feels earned and satisfying. The Duffer Brothers don't rely on cheap tricks or gimmicks. Instead, they use the slow accumulation of details, the growing sense of paranoia, and the emotional arcs of the characters to craft a revelation that feels both shocking and inevitable. It's this sense of gradual discovery that makes Hidden such a remarkable film. The mystery unfolds in such a way that the audience feels like they're piecing together the story just as the characters are. It's a film that rewards close attention to detail, with each scene providing a new clue or piece of the puzzle. And just when you think you've figured it all out, the film throws in a final twist that forces you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew. But what truly makes Hidden extraordinary is its ability to weave together elements of psychological horror, survival drama, and family dynamics into a seamless whole. At its core, the film is about the lengths we'll go to in order to protect those we love, even when it means making unimaginable sacrifices. Ray and Claire's bond, tested by the horrors of their situation, is both heartbreaking and inspiring. The film never shies away from the difficult choices they must make, choices that challenge their morals, their beliefs, and their very sense of self. Visually, Hidden is stunning in its simplicity. The cramped, dimly lit shelter becomes a character in its own right, its claustrophobic nature intensifying the emotional and psychological tension. The filmmakers use shadows and light to create an atmosphere that is as oppressive as it is captivating. There's beauty in the way the film plays with space, and the contrast between the safe confines of the shelter and the terrifying unknown outside creates a visual dichotomy that adds to the film's power. While Hidden may not have the widespread cultural recognition of some other films, it has earned its place as a hidden gem within the thriller genre. The film taps into universal themes: fear, survival, family, and presents them in a way that feels both fresh and timeless. It's a film that lingers in the mind long after the credits roll, its emotional and psychological complexity demanding further reflection. The Duffer Brothers' masterful direction, combined with standout performances from the cast, create a film that is as intellectually engaging as it is emotionally powerful. If you haven't yet experienced Hidden, it's worth diving into, especially for fans of slow-burn thrillers that prioritize atmosphere and psychological depth over traditional horror conventions. This is a film that asks you to think, to question what you'd do in a similar situation, and to reflect on what truly scares us. Not just the monsters lurking outside, but the darker, more terrifying parts of ourselves that emerge when we're pushed to our limits. Hidden begins with a jarring sense of isolation and tension. From the very first frame, the Duffer Brothers, with their signature eye for atmosphere, set the stage for a chilling and suspenseful ride. The camera slowly zooms in on an underground shelter, dimly lit, sparse, and cramped, where Ray, Alexander Skarsgård, Claire, Andrea Riseborough, and their young daughter Zoe, Emily Allen Lind, are living in a terrifying new reality. The family has been holed up for months, ever since a catastrophic event outside led to a complete collapse of the world they once knew. The shelter itself is their only refuge from whatever lurks above, a place where they must constantly worry about keeping noise to a minimum and staying out of sight. As the movie opens, you quickly realize that the family's survival hinges not just on the outside threat but on the complex dynamics between the three of them. Ray, the father, is a protector at heart. He's the one who makes sure the family stays vigilant, ensuring every movement is measured, every sound minimized. His protective instincts are both a strength and a weakness, as we will soon see. Claire, his wife, is more emotionally frail, her anxiety and weariness mounting as days stretch into weeks with no end in sight. She tries to hold on to a semblance of normalcy for their daughter, but the constant pressure of confinement is taking its toll on her mental health. And then there's Zoe, the child who brings some light to their world but also provides the catalyst for much of the emotional tension in the story. In the shelter, daily life is dominated by routine. They wake up, eat, keep watch for any signs of movement, and wait. But it's clear from the beginning that this is no ordinary life. Ray is constantly on edge, checking the ventilation system, listening for anything out of place, and constantly reaffirming that they must stay quiet. His primary goal is simple: survival. And yet, as much as he tries to keep everything under control, there's a palpable sense of fear and desperation in the air. Claire, on the other hand, becomes more and more anxious, questioning Ray's decisions and feeling a growing disconnect between them. She sees him becoming increasingly obsessed with their survival, to the point that it feels like he's keeping something from her. But for now, she pushes those doubts aside, focusing on Zoe and keeping the family as stable as possible. The shelter itself is a constant reminder of their isolation. It's dark, with narrow hallways and little to no comfort, designed solely for survival. The claustrophobic nature of their environment serves as an emotional amplifier. Each noise, each creak of the walls, each thump that echoes from the outside becomes a threat. Early on, it's easy to feel the frustration bubbling under the surface. Ray is a man on a mission, doing whatever it takes to keep his family alive, but it's also clear that the emotional toll of their situation is starting to weigh heavily on him. His obsession with keeping them safe leads to moments of tension between him and Claire, and there's an underlying fear that they're beginning to break down not just because of the external threat, but because of the cracks in their relationship. As the days drag on, Zoe's youthful curiosity becomes a central point of conflict. The child's desire to understand the world outside, to ask questions, and to explore, is a stark contrast to her parents' increasing paranoia. It's a small but significant tension that adds another layer of complexity to the story. Claire, already struggling with her anxiety, tries to shield Zoe from the full extent of the danger that lies outside, while Ray's instinct is to keep Zoe's world as limited as possible, to protect her from the truth. There's a palpable sense of unease every time Zoe asks about the outside, and every time her parents try to keep the answers vague, or worse, outright lie to her. The small moments when Zoe catches on to the tension between her parents foreshadow much larger emotional battles that will come later. The movie skillfully uses subtle foreshadowing in these early moments to signal the audience that things are far worse than they initially appear. Ray's frequent glances toward the ventilation system and his checking of the shelter's security measures seem like mere precautions at first, but as the movie progresses, they take on greater significance. The small things, the way Ray's hands tremble as he adjusts the locks, the way Claire glances nervously at the ceiling every time she hears a noise, speak volumes about their unraveling sense of security. They are trapped, not just physically, but mentally, as the walls of their world close in on them. The tension between them, always present, simmers beneath the surface, heightening the suspense. One pivotal moment that sets the tone for what's to come happens when Ray hears a strange noise from above. At first, it's a small sound, something that could easily be dismissed. But Ray, who has been vigilant about every sound, is immediately alert. He rushes to the shelter's monitoring system, his face tight with anxiety. Claire's voice trembles as she questions what's happening, but Ray refuses to let on how serious it is. The family's safety has always been Ray's #1 priority, and the fact that he's growing visibly distressed sends a signal to the audience. Something is wrong, something is out there. As the story progresses, small moments begin to build toward a more intense conflict. One such moment comes when Zoe is playing with a toy in the shelter, a fleeting glimpse of normalcy in an otherwise oppressive environment. She absent-mindedly lets the toy fall to the floor with a loud clatter, and the family holds their breath. The sound, as innocuous as it seems, is terrifying. Ray reacts with visible panic, rushing to silence her and demanding that she be more careful. Claire, in contrast, grows more tense, questioning if their survival at any cost is really worth the emotional strain it's causing. These moments are crucial because they reveal the cracks in the family's facade. Ray's unyielding drive to protect them at all costs versus Claire's growing emotional turmoil. Then, a key turning point occurs when Zoe, ever curious, presses her father on the nature of the danger outside. She doesn't fully understand what is happening, but her questioning forces Ray into a difficult position. How much should he tell her? How much should she know? The decision to shelter her from the truth becomes a central dilemma for Ray, and the film subtly emphasizes the importance of this moment. Zoe's innocence and need for answers are at odds with Ray's obsession with maintaining control. The moment underscores the heart of the film. The struggle between protecting a loved one and respecting their autonomy, between keeping them safe and allowing them to face the truth. As the first half of the movie unfolds, these small moments of rising tension create a sense of unease that only intensifies as we near a key turning point. The family's isolation is becoming less bearable with each passing day, and their growing disconnect with each other, Ray's paranoia, Claire's anxiety, and Zoe's sense of confusion, sets the stage for a major shift in the story. You can feel that something is about to happen, something that will shatter their fragile reality. One of the film's most exciting and suspenseful moments comes when the family is forced to confront the true extent of the danger outside. After weeks of tension, with the family on edge and their patience wearing thin, they finally hear the unmistakable sounds of something, or someone, moving above them. The noise is different this time, more deliberate, closer. Ray's reaction is immediate. He grabs Claire and Zoe, pulling them into a corner of the shelter and urging them to be completely silent. The scene is a masterclass in tension, with the camera lingering on their faces as the sounds grow louder. You can almost feel the air thickening with fear. This moment foreshadows what's to come, setting the stage for the film's biggest twist. The family's carefully constructed sense of safety is about to be shattered. In the next few scenes, the audience is pushed into the heart of the mystery, and the true nature of the threat is revealed in a way that forces the family, and the audience, to confront their worst fears. The first half of Hidden has been a slow build, but with the introduction of this new danger, the film takes on an even darker tone. The emotional stakes are raised, and we know that the family's journey is only going to get more perilous from here. As the first half of the movie concludes, the tension has reached a boiling point. The family's fragile unity is beginning to crack under the weight of the secrets they're keeping from each other, and the external threat, now no longer an unseen presence but a tangible danger, is drawing closer. The movie has set the stage for an explosive second half, where the family's survival will be tested in ways they never imagined. Their fates, and their relationship, are in jeopardy, and as the film propels forward, you can't help but feel that nothing will ever be the same again. As Hidden moves into its second half, the intensity that had been slowly building in the first act explodes into full force. The external danger, which had previously been a mere whisper in the background, becomes a tangible, life-threatening reality. With every passing moment, the emotional stakes soar, and the family's journey goes from one of survival to a desperate fight for their lives. The first half of the movie set up the psychological tension, the family dynamics, and the looming threat, but the second half brings it all crashing down as Ray, Claire, and Zoe are forced to confront the terrifying truth of their situation. The moment that shifts the story from a survival drama to a full-on thriller is when the family hears the unmistakable sound of something moving above them. This time, it's not just a distant noise. It's close. It's deliberate. The family has been living in the shelter for what seems like an eternity, but now, the world they've been hiding from is crashing into their fragile reality. Ray, who had been so determined to keep his family safe and secure, immediately becomes frantic. Every ounce of his protective instinct kicks in as he moves to shield his family, urging them to stay quiet, stay hidden, and to trust in his plan. He is no longer calm and collected. Now, he's a man on the edge, a man who knows that everything they've done to survive so far could come crumbling down in an instant. Claire, meanwhile, is increasingly terrified, not just for their safety, but for the secrets Ray has been keeping from her. She's been growing more and more distrustful of his decisions, his unshakable control, and his refusal to let her in on the full picture of what's happening. The escalating danger from above forces her to confront her fears head-on, and she begins to question Ray's judgment. Their relationship, which had already been fraying under the pressure of their confinement, is pushed to the brink. The tension is palpable in these early moments of the second half. The family is now fully aware that the world outside the shelter is no longer just a distant threat. It is real, and it is closing in on them. Ray's desperation is clear as he checks the shelter's security measures again and again, his movements frantic. Meanwhile, Claire's fear starts to manifest in a more volatile way. She grows impatient with Ray's constant need for control and begins to push back, challenging his decisions. She's not just afraid of the external threat anymore. She's afraid of Ray's unyielding grip on their lives. And for Zoe, the situation is growing even more confusing. The little girl who had once simply wanted to understand the truth is now faced with the realization that the truth itself may be more horrifying than she could have ever imagined. One of the movie's most emotionally charged scenes comes when Claire finally confronts Ray. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Claire demands to know the full extent of the danger outside. She's tired of living in fear, tired of not knowing what's happening, and most importantly, tired of living in a constant state of deception. Ray's response is chilling. He admits, without much explanation, that there is no hope for the world outside, that the outside world is no longer a place for humanity, that it has been ravaged by something that is beyond their control. But the truth comes too late, and Claire's emotional breakdown is a devastating moment. The sheer weight of the world she's been living in, coupled with the overwhelming fear of the unknown, finally breaks her. As Claire grapples with the horror of their situation, Zoe's role becomes even more crucial to the unfolding drama. The young girl, who had been the symbol of innocence and hope in the first half of the movie, is now facing the reality that her world is not as safe as she once believed. The tenderness between mother and daughter is evident in their moments of closeness, but it's tinged with the sadness of a world falling apart. Zoe becomes a quiet observer to the unraveling of her parents' relationship, and the emotional weight of her innocence provides a stark contrast to the growing darkness around her. The pacing of the second half accelerates as the family's fragile existence in the shelter is further tested. The external danger intensifies. The sounds from above are no longer distant thumps or whispers. They are footsteps, they are movement, they are a constant reminder that whatever is lurking outside is no longer content with just watching. And then, in one of the most jarring moments of the film, the creature, or whatever it is, finally makes its presence known. The family, who had lived in constant fear of the unknown, now must face the terror directly. The revelation of the creature is terrifying not because of what it looks like, but because of what it represents, the utter collapse of everything they've tried to protect. In this moment, the film shifts from psychological horror to full-on survival mode. Ray, Claire, and Zoe must now fight for their lives, and every decision they make could mean the difference between survival and death. The shelter, which had once seemed like a safe haven, becomes a trap. The walls that had once provided protection now seem to close in on them, offering no escape from the terror outside. The family's unity, which had been held together by Ray's unyielding protection, begins to crack completely. Claire, who had questioned Ray's decisions, now becomes the one to take matters into her own hands. The tension between the couple reaches its breaking point, and the power struggle between them escalates. In these moments, the audience is left to wonder if they can even trust each other anymore, let alone survive the horrors that are closing in around them. As the climax of the film approaches, the stakes become almost unbearable. The creature, an unknowable, nightmarish entity, appears to be hunting them, circling the shelter, trying to breach their defenses. The tension is ratcheted up to its breaking point as Ray, Claire, and Zoe try desperately to escape, to find some way out, or to confront the creature head-on. The family's survival instincts kick in, and they are forced to make impossible choices, sacrifices that will test their moral limits and ultimately determine their fate. In a gut-wrenching twist, just as it seems they have made it to safety, the true nature of the creature is revealed. The family, having fought so hard to survive, discovers that the external danger they feared was not just a physical monster, but something far more sinister. The revelation shatters their perception of everything they had been told to fear. It's a moment of intense emotional and intellectual shock that redefines the entire story, transforming Hidden from a simple survival thriller into a meditation on the nature of fear, trust, and what it means to protect the ones we love. The final act of Hidden brings all the threads of the story together in a breathtaking and poignant way. The family's survival, their struggle to maintain their humanity in the face of unimaginable horror, and their emotional and psychological unraveling come to a head in a series of heart-pounding moments. Ray's desperation to protect his family is juxtaposed with Claire's growing realization that survival may come at the cost of their very souls. Zoe, the child who had once been the symbol of innocence, is forced to make a choice that will alter the course of her life forever. The resolution of the film, while not providing all the answers, is deeply satisfying. The final moments of Hidden leave the audience with a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that the horrors of the outside world may never fully be understood. The film's emotional weight is profound, and the ultimate message is clear. Survival is not just about staying alive, but about what you're willing to sacrifice, and what kind of person you become in the process. By the time the credits roll, Hidden has completed its arc, transforming from a tense psychological thriller into a profound exploration of the human condition. The second half of the film solidifies its place as a standout in the genre, delivering a conclusion that resonates deeply with anyone who has ever questioned what they would do in the face of extreme fear and isolation. The film's twist, its character dynamics, and its emotional depth make it an unforgettable experience, one that will linger long after the final scene fades to black. In Hidden, the characters are more than just survivors in a dystopian world. They are the emotional heartbeat of the film. Their motivations, transformations, and internal struggles give the narrative its depth and intensity. The movie expertly weaves their individual journeys into the larger story of fear, survival, and the erosion of human relationships under extreme pressure. Ray, Alexander Skarsgård, Claire, Andrea Riseborough, and Zoe, Emily Allen Lind, are the central figures, and their emotional arcs are what drive the story forward, each of them undergoing transformations that challenge their sense of self, their roles within the family, and the very nature of the world they thought they knew. At the core of the film is Ray, a father whose sole purpose seems to be the protection of his family. His journey is defined by his obsessive need to keep them safe from the unknown terror outside the shelter. From the beginning, Ray comes across as a steadfast, determined protector, willing to make any sacrifice to ensure his family's survival. However, as the film progresses, the cracks in his protective armor start to show. Ray is a man who has created a fortress not just against the external dangers, but against the emotional and psychological decay creeping in from within. The isolation of the shelter has forced him into an almost monastic existence, his every move dictated by a single goal: survival. His growing obsession with control and his reluctance to open up to Claire creates a tension that permeates the entire film. What makes Ray such a compelling character is the internal conflict between his overwhelming sense of responsibility and his own vulnerability. Alexander Skarsgård brings this complex internal struggle to life with an understated yet powerful performance. His portrayal of Ray is not just of a man who is terrified for his family's safety, but of someone who is slowly losing touch with his humanity in the face of fear. The intensity of his need to protect his loved ones starts to morph into a kind of emotional tyranny, where every decision he makes, every action he takes, is calculated to ensure their physical safety, but not necessarily their emotional well-being. This becomes apparent when Claire starts to question his judgment and his refusal to tell her the truth about the outside world. The cracks in their relationship aren't just the result of external dangers but of Ray's refusal to open up, to let Claire see the fear and panic that are slowly taking root in his own psyche. Ray's relationship with Zoe also serves as a key point of emotional tension. As the young girl innocently presses for answers, asking why they can't leave or what's really happening outside, Ray's answer is always vague, keeping her in the dark. But Zoe's questioning nature forces him to confront a painful truth. He cannot keep his family in the shelter forever. She begins to symbolize a kind of innocence that cannot be fully shielded from the horror outside, and as much as Ray wants to protect her, he realizes that he cannot do so indefinitely. Skarsgård's performance delicately balances Ray's unflinching determination with moments of visible emotional exhaustion, allowing us to see the humanity behind his stern exterior. Then there's Claire, the emotional anchor of the family, whose arc is just as powerful and intricate. Where Ray is rigid, Claire is fluid, her emotional state fluctuating as the pressure of their isolation begins to take its toll. Played with nuanced grace by Andrea Riseborough, Claire is a character defined by her vulnerability. From the outset, she is portrayed as someone whose anxiety and fear are palpable. Her emotional fragility stands in stark contrast to Ray's stoicism, but it's also a strength in its own right. Her fear is not just of the external danger but of the emotional distance growing between her and Ray. She feels like a prisoner, not only to the external threats that surround them but to the constant emotional walls Ray erects. The tension in their relationship is immediately evident. Claire is a woman who loves her husband but feels increasingly alienated by his need to control every aspect of their lives. The emotional weight of Claire's character is most deeply felt in her moments of isolation. When Ray becomes increasingly obsessed with the shelter's security and their survival, Claire begins to question her own place in the world they've created. She is not just trapped in a physical shelter, but in an emotional one as well. Riseborough's performance captures this inner turmoil with subtlety and depth. Her portrayal of Claire's anxiety is both heartbreaking and relatable. She's a woman on the edge, clinging to the fragments of her sanity as she begins to unravel. And as Claire begins to question Ray's choices and confront the terrifying truth of their situation, her emotional arc becomes one of self-discovery. She is forced to look past Ray's protective instincts and find a way to reconnect with herself, and with Zoe, in a world that no longer feels safe. Zoe, the young daughter, is the character who represents the hope and innocence of the pre-apocalyptic world, but she is also the one most directly affected by the collapse of everything she's known. Played with remarkable sincerity by Emily Allen Lind, Zoe's role in the film is more than just that of a child caught in the middle of an adult world. She's a mirror for the audience, asking the questions we want answers to but can't always find. As the film progresses, her transformation from innocent curiosity to a more mature understanding of the danger outside is both heartbreaking and inevitable. She's a child caught between the world of her parents' secrets and the terrifying truth of the world outside. Her relationship with her parents is the emotional core of the film, and Lind brings a haunting tenderness to the role. Zoe's confusion and fear mirror the audience's own unease, and her growth throughout the movie serves as a painful reminder of the harsh realities the family must face. But it's not just the central trio who drive the story forward. The supporting characters, though few in number, play a crucial role in heightening the emotional stakes and pushing the plot to its next level. The outside world, which initially seems like a mere abstract threat, begins to take on more physical form as the family's isolation becomes unbearable. The small glimpses of the outside world, through the tiny, suffocating windows of the shelter, through the strange noises that punctuate the silence, serve to deepen the mystery and raise the tension. These moments reinforce the idea that there is something much more sinister at play than just a monster lurking in the dark. But even with these supporting elements, it's the relationships between Ray, Claire, and Zoe that truly anchor the story. The tension between Ray's need to protect and Claire's growing anxiety is the primary driver of the film's emotional arc. Their interactions evolve from moments of quiet disagreement to full-blown emotional confrontations. The breakdown of their relationship is one of the most powerful aspects of the film. As they begin to unravel under the weight of the truth about the outside world, they are forced to confront not only the horrors of their environment but the fractured nature of their family. Every decision, every word spoken, becomes more loaded with meaning as the film progresses, and the actors manage to bring these charged moments to life with stunning authenticity. As the stakes rise, so does the tension within the family. Ray's transformation from protector to a man struggling to maintain control over the situation, Claire's evolution from anxious partner to someone who demands the truth, and Zoe's heartbreaking shift from innocence to a more sobering understanding of the world. Each of these arcs plays out with deep emotional resonance. The transformation of their relationships, the push and pull between survival and humanity, is what makes Hidden so compelling. The performances by Skarsgård, Riseborough, and Lind bring these arcs to life in such a way that the audience feels their pain, their fear, and ultimately, their growth. Ultimately, Hidden is not just about the monster lurking outside, but about the monsters that live within us. The fears, the anxieties, the lies we tell ourselves to cope with a world that seems out of our control. The characters' arcs serve as a reflection of the emotional toll that extreme isolation and fear can take on the human psyche. As the film reaches its crescendo, Ray, Claire, and Zoe are forced to confront the painful reality of what it means to survive, and what they're willing to sacrifice in the name of that survival. The characters may be trapped in a shelter, but it is their emotional journey that truly makes Hidden unforgettable. The production of Hidden, 2015, was a unique journey, not just for the filmmakers but also for the cast and crew who worked tirelessly to bring this tension-filled, claustrophobic thriller to life. The movie's minimalist approach, with much of its story unfolding in a single, isolated location, created a set of challenges and behind-the-scenes moments that were as intense and surprising as the film itself. With a focus on psychological horror, survival, and human relationships, Hidden was never going to be a typical filmmaking experience. The small scale, combined with the heavy emotional and technical demands, led to some truly fascinating, strange, and even controversial behind-the-scenes stories that deserve to be shared. Let's dive into the lesser-known world of Hidden's production, uncovering the secrets behind its creation and the quirks of making a film that keeps its audience on the edge of their seat. One of the first things that stands out when talking about Hidden is the film's reliance on a confined space. The shelter that Ray, Claire, and Zoe are trapped in for most of the movie is not just an important part of the story, it's practically a character in itself. The claustrophobic, almost oppressive atmosphere of the shelter was one of the biggest production challenges. Filming within such a tight space was an obvious hurdle, but what made it even more difficult was the film's reliance on minimalistic sets and special effects. The crew had to get creative to convey the sense of isolation without relying on the kind of wide shots or extravagant set designs common in bigger-budget thrillers. This meant the entire production design team had to think outside the box, transforming the small shelter into a believable home under siege. The set itself was designed with an overwhelming sense of realism, and it's said that the design team went to great lengths to make the space feel as genuine as possible. But in the cramped quarters of the shelter, this approach created difficulties of its own. It wasn't just about building a physical set. There were constant technical considerations involving lighting, camera work, and sound, all while trying to maintain the illusion of an airtight, confined world. Lighting became a particularly tricky aspect of the production. Because the shelter was meant to be a dark, often dimly lit environment, creating the right atmosphere without making the scenes too murky for the audience to follow was an ongoing struggle. In the end, the filmmakers used specialized lighting techniques that played off shadows and tight camera angles to preserve both the film's mood and visual clarity. The result is a film that feels distinctly claustrophobic but still visually engaging. This minimalist approach to the setting also meant that Hidden had to rely heavily on its performances to drive the story, a challenge that the cast took on with impressive commitment. The emotional intensity that the actors brought to the table was undoubtedly a huge part of the film's success, but their own personal experiences were intertwined with the production in surprising ways. Alexander Skarsgård, known for his roles in True Blood and Big Little Lies, has always been a versatile actor, but playing Ray in Hidden required a shift into a different kind of emotional depth. According to sources on set, Skarsgård underwent a unique training process to get into the mind of a father trapped in a seemingly unescapable situation. He spent hours in isolation, practicing the emotional and physical aspects of Ray's protective instincts and pushing his boundaries in terms of how far he would go to maintain control. This wasn't just about putting on a brave face. Skarsgård's performance needed to reflect the growing psychological toll that the situation was taking on his character. To prepare, he isolated himself in a dark room for extended periods of time, replicating the sense of confinement and fear that Ray would experience in the shelter. The sense of desperation and obsession that Skarsgård brought to the role was rooted in this personal experience. Andrea Riseborough, who plays Claire, also brought her own unique approach to her character. Known for her versatility and emotionally raw performances, Riseborough took a deep dive into Claire's mental state, exploring the character's isolation and anxiety. What many don't know is that, while filming, Riseborough began experiencing moments of intense emotional fatigue that mirrored Claire's struggles. In one particularly gripping scene, where Claire confronts Ray about his secrets and the truth of the outside world, Riseborough's breakdown wasn't entirely acted. It was the result of her personal emotional exhaustion, having spent long hours shooting in the same small space. It's said that her vulnerability on set added a layer of authenticity to the emotional scenes between Claire and Ray, making those moments feel raw and real. One of the most surprising aspects of the film is how well Emily Allen Lind, as young Zoe, held her own against the more seasoned actors. Filming in such a tense, confined space with limited interaction from the outside world could have easily overwhelmed any young actor, but Lind approached her role with a maturity that stunned both cast and crew. Lind's role as Zoe required her to navigate a world that was slowly falling apart, and her moments of innocent curiosity contrasted sharply with the growing emotional weight on her parents. Behind the scenes, Lind was frequently praised for her professionalism. She spent days rehearsing difficult emotional scenes with the older actors, which often required her to access deep levels of vulnerability and fear. There's a particularly poignant scene in the movie where Zoe confronts her parents about the situation, and it's said that Lind drew from her own anxieties about the unknown during the shoot, making her performance even more gripping and believable. But while the cast was deeply immersed in their roles, the technical side of the production brought its own strange and difficult moments. One particularly challenging scene involved the creature that looms over the family throughout the film. The creature itself is never fully revealed, keeping the sense of mystery and fear alive, but the sound design and visual effects needed to suggest a constant, lurking threat. The creature's presence was conveyed not through elaborate CGI but through sound design, scratching noises, subtle vibrations, and breathing sounds that unnerved both the characters and the audience. Interestingly, the sound design team recorded these sounds using real-world tools, including a large sheet of metal dragged across the floor, creating an eerie atmosphere. These sounds were so unsettling that the crew often found themselves unnerved even when the creature wasn't visible on set. The technical team's ability to use sound to evoke fear is one of the film's key storytelling techniques, and it turned out to be one of the most unexpected challenges of the production. But what makes Hidden stand out even more is the strange atmosphere that permeated the set due to its isolation. Much of the filming took place in a controlled, confined environment with very little external light or stimulation. As a result, the cast and crew found themselves working in an environment that was almost as tense and isolated as the world they were depicting. According to several crew members, the isolation began to affect their moods and energy levels in ways that mirrored the characters' emotional deterioration. Crew members have recalled that the combination of the intense shooting schedule, the dark set, and the emotional weight of the material created an eerie, almost unsettling atmosphere. There were moments when the line between fiction and reality seemed to blur, with actors and crew alike feeling the strain of the confined space. Another fascinating aspect of the film's production was the way the director, Matt and Josh Baker, approached the pacing and tension. Known for their background in making psychological thrillers, the Bakers emphasized minimalism, not just in the set design, but in the pacing and structure of the story. One of the more unusual choices they made was shooting the film in a non-linear fashion. While the film may appear to unfold in a straightforward manner, many of the scenes were shot out of sequence, forcing the actors to tap into their emotions in a raw and instinctual way. This approach made each of the performances feel more genuine, as the actors weren't just reacting to the immediate situation, but had to dig deep into the emotional well of their characters to ensure each moment landed with authenticity. Filming the first half of Hidden, which relied heavily on tense, quiet scenes in the shelter, was particularly challenging. With the lack of external events driving the plot, the filmmakers had to rely on subtle shifts in mood and atmosphere to keep the audience engaged. This meant that the camera work had to be precise and deliberate. Cinematographer Danny B. L. Nelson worked tirelessly to capture the emotional weight of each scene, often utilizing long takes and tight framing to emphasize the character's emotional isolation. The technical precision of the camera work contributed to the sense of dread that permeates the entire film. Hidden's production process was undeniably intense, with the emotional strain felt by the actors, the claustrophobic set, and the heavy reliance on sound design to convey terror all contributing to the film's powerful atmosphere. Behind the scenes, Hidden was a deeply collaborative effort, with every element, acting, sound, and design, working together to craft a narrative that keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. These strange, unexpected moments during production added layers of authenticity to the film, making it not just a psychological thriller but a film shaped by the very isolation and fear it depicts. The challenges faced on set ultimately enhanced the finished product, transforming Hidden into a haunting, unforgettable cinematic experience. Creating Hidden, 2015, was a unique challenge in filmmaking, not only because of its gripping, isolated narrative but also because of the innovative technical approaches the filmmakers took to bring this psychological thriller to life. It's not often that a film with such a minimalistic setting becomes such a technical and creative achievement, but Hidden does just that, using resourcefulness and inventive filmmaking techniques to create an atmosphere of deep tension and claustrophobia, making the audience feel the same suffocating sense of isolation as the characters. Behind the scenes, every decision, from the set design to the visual effects, was carefully crafted to pull off the delicate balance of fear, suspense, and psychological intrigue. Another unique aspect of Hidden's technical innovation is the way it plays with perspective. The narrative is presented largely through the eyes of Ray, Claire, and Zoe, but the audience is often limited in their view of the world outside the shelter. The film's perspective is subjective, and the filmmakers were careful not to give the audience too much information at once. The idea of seeing the world only through the character's limited viewpoint adds to the tension and mystery of the story. This technique was especially effective in making the audience feel just as trapped and helpless as the characters themselves. There's a constant sense of what's out there, but the film withholds the answers until the emotional stakes are impossibly high. The performances of the cast were essential in translating the emotional weight of the film's technical innovations. The intense, psychological nature of the narrative required an equally intense approach from the actors. Alexander Skarsgård, Andrea Riseborough, and Emily Allen Lind all embraced their roles with incredible emotional commitment. Their performances, combined with the technical achievements of the film, brought the suffocating sense of dread and isolation to life. Skarsgård's ability to portray Ray's transformation from protector to something more desperate and paranoid gave depth to the film's central conflict, while Riseborough's portrayal of Claire's emotional unraveling mirrored the physical limitations of the shelter. Lind's performance as Zoe, the child caught in the middle of her parents' fractured world, added an element of innocence and vulnerability that made the tension all the more heartbreaking. The movie also leaned on subtle visual effects to help create its atmosphere of mystery. The creature lurking outside the shelter was not revealed through extravagant CGI. Instead, its presence was hinted at with subtle effects that suggested its form, often leaving the audience to fill in the blanks with their imagination. The filmmakers understood that, sometimes, what is suggested is far more terrifying than what is shown, and this approach became a cornerstone of the film's success. Instead of focusing on elaborate monster designs or grand visual spectacles, Hidden allowed the tension to build through suggestion and atmosphere. The creature was never fully seen, but the fear of it permeated every corner of the shelter. Ultimately, the technical achievements of Hidden are a testament to the filmmaker's ability to create something with limited resources but immense creative vision. By blending practical effects, sound design, and innovative camera work with emotionally driven performances, they constructed a film that relied on subtlety and tension rather than overt spectacle. Hidden isn't just a psychological thriller, it's a masterclass in how to use technical skill to enhance a story, turning what could have been a simple premise into a haunting, immersive experience that leaves a lasting impression. In Hidden, 2015, the deeper themes and subtle symbolism extend beyond its immediate narrative of survival within a confined space. The movie's claustrophobic setting, the isolation of its characters, and the relentless tension that pulses through every scene serve as a vessel for exploring deeper questions about fear, human resilience, and the ways in which trauma shapes the psyche. While on the surface, it may appear to be a simple survival horror story, Hidden uses its minimalist structure to explore complex social and psychological themes. As the story unfolds, layers of meaning slowly emerge, revealing a nuanced commentary on societal anxieties, human nature, and the hidden traumas that individuals carry with them. The most obvious theme at the heart of Hidden is the concept of fear, specifically, the fear of the unknown. From the moment the film begins, the audience is thrust into a situation where the full nature of the threat is obscured. The shelter's inhabitants, Ray, Claire, and Zoe, are trapped in a confined space, both physically and emotionally, with the constant knowledge that something dangerous is lurking just beyond the walls. This fear of the unknown becomes a pervasive force throughout the film, dictating the characters' actions and decisions. The absence of concrete information about the outside world, the creature that stalks them, or even the true nature of their situation forces the characters, and the audience, to grapple with the ambiguity of their circumstances. This fear is not just external but internal as well. The shelter itself becomes a metaphor for the psychological walls that each character has built around themselves. For Ray, His protective instinct towards his family is a double-edged sword. While it keeps them safe, it also prevents them from confronting the truth of their situation. Ray's obsession with control, his strict rules, his refusal to let Claire or Zoe out of the shelter, reflects an internal battle against his own fear and guilt. In many ways, the shelter represents his desire to shield his family from the outside world. Yet this very act of shielding them is what traps them in a psychological prison. Ray's transformation from a man determined to protect his family to one who becomes a prisoner of his own making mirrors the internal struggle between safety and freedom, and it speaks to the larger fear that underpins the entire film. The fear of loss and the lengths one will go to prevent it. Similarly, Claire's emotional journey throughout the film also touches on themes of fear and control, but from a different angle. Claire is torn between wanting to protect her daughter and coming to terms with the reality of their situation. She's emotionally conflicted, fearful of what the future holds, but also deeply afraid of confronting the truth about their situation. This fear manifests in her relationship with Ray, where the tension between them is not just about their circumstances but about the unspoken anxieties each of them is carrying. The shelter, as much as it represents physical protection, also represents an emotional barrier between Claire and Ray. Their inability to truly communicate with each other, to face the truth together, is one of the central emotional conflicts in the film. As the story unfolds, fear takes on new dimensions, especially with the gradual revelation of the outside world. The audience is kept in suspense for most of the film about what lies beyond the shelter, and it's only in the latter half that pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place. The creature, initially a shadowy threat that is never fully revealed, becomes a symbol for the external dangers that the characters are avoiding, but it also serves as a representation of something even more profound: the emotional and psychological scars that each character is struggling to confront. Just as the creature is never fully seen, the emotional baggage the characters carry, grief, guilt, trauma, remains hidden, only becoming visible as the characters are forced to face it. The symbolism of the creature is a crucial part of this analysis. The creature outside the shelter can be seen as a manifestation of the unseen fears and dangers that the characters face, but it also symbolizes the emotional and psychological monsters that lurk within them. The creature's constant scratching, its presence just beyond the threshold of their shelter, is an eerie parallel to the way trauma and guilt often lurk in the subconscious. The film subtly suggests that the real monster is not the external threat, but the way that the characters' pasts and fears have shaped their current reality. The more they try to hide from the creature, the more they realize they are hiding from themselves. The creature is not just a physical danger, it's a reflection of the very fears that are keeping them trapped, both inside the shelter and within their own minds. Another key theme that emerges from Hidden is the idea of survival and the lengths to which people will go to protect themselves and their loved ones. The tension between Ray's instinct to control and Claire's desire to confront the truth creates a dynamic in which survival becomes not just a matter of physical endurance, but emotional endurance. Both Ray and Claire are pushed to their breaking points, and in doing so, they reveal the complexities of human resilience. Survival, in Hidden, is not only about staying alive physically but also about preserving one's sense of humanity. Ray's obsession with keeping his family safe, even at the cost of their emotional well-being, speaks to the lengths people go to in times of crisis, often losing themselves in the process. His refusal to let go of the illusion of control is his way of coping with the horror that the world outside represents, but it ultimately isolates him from his family. His desire to shield them from harm paradoxically leads to his own emotional and psychological unraveling. In contrast, Claire's emotional journey reflects a different kind of survival. Throughout the film, Claire grapples with the tension between wanting to protect her daughter and coming to terms with the fact that she cannot control every aspect of their fate. Her emotional arc, moving from denial to acceptance, is a powerful reflection of the way people adapt to extreme circumstances, often shifting their priorities in order to cope. Claire's transformation is one of the most poignant in the film, as she learns to let go of the desire for control and begins to confront the truth of their situation. This shift in perspective not only changes her relationship with Ray, but also allows her to rediscover her strength as a mother and a person. As the film reaches its climax, the theme of survival takes on new layers, as the family must come to terms with what they are truly surviving for. It's no longer just about escaping the creature outside. It's about finding a way to rebuild their emotional connection and move forward from the trauma they've experienced. In this sense, the film asks a larger question about the nature of survival itself. Is it enough to simply stay alive, or is there something more to living a full life, even in the face of overwhelming fear? The film also serves as a subtle commentary on societal and cultural anxieties. On a larger scale, Hidden can be seen as a metaphor for how modern society grapples with fear, trauma, and isolation. The character's situation, though extreme, mirrors a pervasive cultural unease. The fear of being unprotected, the fear of the outside world, the fear of being overwhelmed by forces beyond our control. In an era where global crises, political instability, and environmental collapse are frequent topics of discussion, Hidden taps into a collective anxiety about safety and survival. The isolation that Ray, Claire, and Zoe experience reflects a modern sense of alienation, where the walls between people, both physically and emotionally, are constantly being built higher. The shelter in the film, as a microcosm of society, becomes a place of both safety and entrapment, offering protection while also fostering isolation. There's also an undercurrent of social commentary in the way Hidden deals with themes of family and trust. The shelter becomes a place where traditional roles, father as protector, mother as nurturer, are tested by the extreme circumstances they face. Ray's role as the head of the family is challenged as he becomes more paranoid and controlling, while Claire's role as the emotional center of the family shifts as she begins to reclaim her agency. The film subtly critiques the way family dynamics can break down under pressure, and how the roles we assign to ourselves and each other can become sources of conflict when tested by crisis. In conclusion, Hidden uses its psychological horror framework to explore deep themes of fear, trauma, survival, and the human condition. The film's symbolic elements, the creature, the shelter, the isolation, serve as metaphors for the internal struggles of its characters, while also reflecting broader societal fears. The journey of Ray, Claire, and Zoe is not just about physical survival. It's about confronting the hidden emotional scars that each of them carries and finding a way to heal from them. The movie's focus on the unseen, whether it's the monster outside or the emotional wounds within, creates a poignant and thought-provoking narrative that lingers long after the credits roll. Hidden is a film that challenges its audience to consider not just what lies beyond the walls of the shelter, but what lies hidden inside each of us. In Hidden, 2015, the visual storytelling is central to the film's ability to evoke tension, fear, and a sense of isolation. From the first frame to the last, the way the movie is shot, edited, and scored intensifies the psychological thriller aspects of the story, amplifying the claustrophobic, emotionally charged atmosphere. The technical aspects of the film, from its cinematography to its sound design, are not just tools for storytelling. They are integral parts of the experience, pushing the narrative into a realm where what's unseen and what's barely heard carry as much weight as what's directly in front of us. Each decision in the film's design, from the tight framing to the use of silence, serves to elevate the underlying themes of fear, survival, and the breakdown of familial bonds. The cinematography in Hidden is as much a character in the story as the family members themselves. The film's director, Matt and Ross Duffer, better known as the Duffer Brothers, famed for Stranger Things, brings their signature tension-building sensibilities to this project, making use of minimalist, controlled camera movements to create an atmosphere of escalating anxiety. The film's visual style hinges on a deep understanding of how limited space, lighting, and perspective can be used to heighten emotional impact. One of the first techniques that becomes apparent is the film's strategic use of close-ups and tight shots. From the very beginning, the audience is thrust into the confined world of the shelter with Ray, Alexander Skarsgård, Claire, Andrea Riseborough, and their daughter Zoe, Emily Allen Lind. The shelter is a small, claustrophobic space, and the cinematography reinforces this by using tight frames to show how trapped the family is, both physically and emotionally. The close-ups on characters' faces, particularly during moments of high tension, draw attention to the nuances of their expressions, allowing the audience to feel their fear and frustration up close. When Ray's protective instincts start to break down, or when Claire begins to question their situation, these intimate shots become essential for understanding their internal conflicts. The camera focuses on their eyes, their hands, even the small details of their interactions, highlighting their emotional states and the weight of their decisions. The decision to frame shots tightly also enhances the film's overall feeling of entrapment. The walls of the shelter are often visible in the background, enclosing the characters in every frame. The cinematography almost never lets the characters breathe. There's always a sense that they are being watched, not just by the creature outside but by the audience as well. The visual style forces us to confront the same claustrophobia and paranoia that the characters feel, making the shelter feel more like a psychological prison than a mere physical one. Even when the camera moves through different spaces within the shelter, it remains tight, rarely allowing for wide shots that could give a sense of freedom. There is no escaping the suffocating atmosphere that defines the space. The Duffer Brothers also play with light and shadow to craft a visual language that reflects the character's state of mind. The film's lighting choices, often dim and harsh, serve as a visual metaphor for the character's psychological states. The shelter, with its limited light sources, often feels like a dark, oppressive cave. The film uses artificial lighting sparingly, drawing attention to its sources, like lamps and flashlights, which only add to the sense that the characters are trying to hold onto some semblance of control in an uncontrollable world. The use of shadow is also critical. Moments of fear and tension are often heightened by darkness, with characters moving in and out of pools of light, creating an eerie feeling that something could be lurking just outside of view. This interplay between light and shadow creates a visual rhythm, one that reflects the emotional turmoil of the characters, especially as Ray's mental state begins to unravel. One of the most notable visual choices in Hidden is the way the filmmakers employ mirrors and reflective surfaces throughout the story. From the beginning, we see reflections of the characters in small, often fragmented ways. Whether it's a glimpse of Ray's face in a metal surface or a reflection of Claire in a cracked mirror, these moments suggest an underlying theme of fractured identities. The idea of looking at oneself, whether physically in a mirror or emotionally in a reflective surface, is central to the film's exploration of the psychological toll of isolation. It also plays into the larger theme of perception versus reality. What the characters see in their reflections is often distorted, and this mirrors their own emotional disintegration as they come to terms with the horrors of their situation. The reflective surfaces constantly remind the audience of the tension between what the characters think they know and what they are truly facing, both in the outside world and within themselves. The editing in Hidden is tight and deliberate, working hand in hand with the cinematography to maintain a high level of tension. The film makes excellent use of pacing, drawing the audience into the characters' escalating panic, only to pull back just before a major reveal, building the suspense. There are moments when the editing slows down, allowing a scene to breathe and giving the audience time to process the emotional weight of a character's decision or realization. These moments of stillness make the eventual outbursts of action feel even more shocking. The filmmakers know exactly when to cut and when to let a scene play out, a balancing act that keeps the audience on edge without overwhelming them with constant action. The editing also plays a role in how the film manipulates time. In certain sequences, the passage of time becomes disorienting. Characters in one room may be shown having a conversation, only for a quick cut to reveal hours or even days have passed. This disjointed sense of time reflects the characters' emotional states, as they try to survive in a world where the normal rules no longer apply. The pacing also takes a non-linear approach, particularly in the way flashbacks are interwoven into the present-day narrative. The audience is kept in the dark for much of the film about what happened to the outside world, and the flashbacks gradually reveal bits of information that shift the narrative. The way these flashbacks are edited into the present is seamless, never feeling jarring or out of place, but their fragmented nature contributes to the overall sense of confusion and disorientation that the characters feel. The flashbacks don't necessarily follow a clear timeline, and this adds to the emotional and psychological fragmentation the characters experience. The editing encourages the audience to try to piece together the puzzle with the characters, slowly revealing bits of truth until the entire picture is exposed. But it's not just the visuals and editing that shape Hidden's atmosphere. The sound design plays an equally crucial role in intensifying the film's horror and suspense. One of the most impressive aspects of the film's sound design is how it uses silence and ambient noise to heighten the tension. The shelter is often eerily quiet, with the smallest noises, footsteps, the scraping of metal, the whisper of the wind outside, becoming incredibly amplified. The film knows that silence can be just as terrifying as the most jarring sound. When the characters hear something outside the shelter, the quietness of their world makes every noise feel like a potential threat. The film's use of ambient sound also emphasizes the isolation of the family. The sound design feels intimate, often placing the audience directly inside the shelter with the characters. The creature lurking outside the shelter is never fully revealed, and its presence is conveyed through sound in a masterful way. From the scratching noises that echo through the walls to the low growls that reverberate through the shelter's structure, the sound becomes a key element in building the creature's presence. What's brilliant about the sound design is how it makes the creature feel real even without showing it. The noise alone builds the tension, allowing the audience's imagination to fill in the blanks. The filmmakers understand that what is suggested is often far more terrifying than what is directly shown, and the creature's unsettling noises tap into a primal fear that something is always just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The soundscape in Hidden also becomes an emotional tool. As Ray's mental state deteriorates and his grip on reality weakens, the sound design reflects his descent into paranoia. In moments of intense fear, the soundtrack swells, amplifying the character's heightened anxiety. In contrast, quieter moments are often marked by a low, unsettling hum, a reminder that the danger is never far away. These tonal shifts in the sound design work hand in hand with the visual style, reinforcing the film's thematic exploration of fear, paranoia, and emotional breakdown. Music in Hidden is used sparingly but effectively. The soundtrack doesn't overwhelm the story, but rather complements it with subtle, atmospheric melodies that serve to underscore the emotional stakes of the narrative. In moments of quiet tension, the music is often minimalistic, soft, sparse notes that create a sense of unease. This restrained approach to music reinforces the film's overall mood, allowing the silence to speak just as loudly as the score. When music does swell to the forefront, it is used to accentuate key emotional beats or moments of revelation, intensifying the impact of these scenes. The score never takes center stage but instead remains in the background, adding texture to the film's overall emotional landscape. In conclusion, the visual style, cinematography, editing, sound design, and music of Hidden work together in a flawless synthesis that creates an immersive, emotionally charged experience. The film's tight, controlled framing, the subtle manipulation of light and shadow, and the strategic use of sound all contribute to the sense of fear and isolation that permeates every frame. The Duffer Brothers' directorial vision is evident in the way they build tension through restraint, allowing the audience to feel the emotional weight of each moment. The film's ability to create a sense of dread without relying on overt horror tropes is a testament to the filmmaker's mastery of cinematic techniques. Through these carefully crafted elements, Hidden transforms into a psychological experience that stays with the viewer long after the credits roll. In Hidden, 2015, the marriage of visual style, cinematography, editing, sound design, and music creates an immersive and tension-filled experience that makes the film as much about psychological depth as it is about its gripping narrative. Through subtle yet highly effective techniques, the filmmakers manage to pull the audience into a world of isolation, fear, and survival. This intricate web of cinematic devices plays a pivotal role in amplifying the emotional resonance and fear that the characters experience, often elevating the film beyond the constraints of a typical survival horror story. Each decision made in the filmmaking process contributes to creating an atmosphere where the unseen, the unheard, and the unnoticed shape the story as much as what is directly presented to the viewer. At the heart of Hidden is its visual style, which can be described as minimalist yet profoundly impactful. The choice to set much of the story within the cramped, confined spaces of a shelter creates a visual metaphor for the character's psychological entrapment. The cinematography, led by Hidden's director, Matt Duffer and Ross Duffer, utilizes tight, controlled shots to emphasize the confinement of the characters and the mounting tension in their world. This claustrophobic style forces the audience to experience the same sense of restriction and isolation that the family members are enduring. The camera work is one of the most immediately noticeable aspects of Hidden's visual style. Tight close-ups, particularly of characters' faces, are employed consistently throughout the film to force the viewer into an intimate relationship with the character's fear and anxiety. These close-up shots serve not only to showcase the performer's emotional depth but also to intensify the feeling of being trapped with them. The faces of Ray, Alexander Skarsgård, Claire, Andrea Riseborough, and Zoe, Emily Allen Lind, are almost always framed within the limited confines of the shelter, which feels more like a psychological prison than a physical one. The fact that the characters are never shown in wide shots, and rarely outside of the confines of their small space, heightens the sensation that they are being watched, not just by the creature outside but also by the audience, who are invited into this unnervingly intimate world. The Duffer Brothers' decision to keep the framing tight and the camera movements minimal is a deliberate choice to limit what the audience can see. This keeps the focus on the characters' emotional states, capturing the subtleties of their reactions in moments of tension. When the camera does move, it does so with purpose, either lingering on a character in a moment of personal crisis or slowly panning across the room to subtly imply the passage of time or the increasing danger outside. These movements are slow and deliberate, building tension gradually rather than delivering jarring jumps. This controlled approach mirrors the overall pacing of the film, which allows the suspense to build in layers rather than through abrupt, obvious moments of horror. What makes the cinematography even more effective is the interplay of light and shadow, which becomes a central visual theme throughout the film. The lighting within the shelter is often dim and harsh, with artificial sources like lamps, flashlights, and overhead bulbs creating pools of light that stand in stark contrast to the surrounding darkness. These lighting choices contribute to the overwhelming sense of isolation, suggesting that even in the shelter, the family members are alone, not just physically, but emotionally. The sparse, artificial lighting often emphasizes the starkness of the shelter, its cold metallic walls, and the absence of warmth that would otherwise offer comfort. This creates a visual tension between the supposed safety of the shelter and the emotional and psychological toll it takes on the family. The shadows, too, play an integral role in building the sense of dread. Throughout Hidden, the shadows seem to stretch and loom in a way that makes it feel as if the very walls of the shelter are closing in. There's a deliberate use of shadow to obscure the edges of the frame or to hide details that would otherwise make the world feel more expansive. At times, the light appears almost fragile, flickering, dimming, or casting long, ominous shadows that stretch across the room. These shadows often seem to act as an extension of the family's emotional turmoil, reflecting their fears and their ever-present sense of unease. The film also uses reflection as a symbolic device in its visual language. Mirrors, metal surfaces, and even glass are used throughout Hidden to create moments where characters are seen in reflection, often fragmented or distorted. This visual device reflects the fractured emotional states of the characters, particularly Ray. As his grip on reality weakens, these reflective surfaces subtly underscore his deteriorating mental state. At the same time, these mirrors and reflections suggest the idea of looking at oneself, whether through the literal act of seeing one's own face or the more metaphorical reflection of one's emotional and psychological state. The repeated use of fractured and incomplete reflections adds to the feeling of disconnection that permeates the film. Ray, Claire, and Zoe are not just trapped physically in the shelter, but emotionally within themselves as well, unable to fully connect with each other or the world outside. The editing of Hidden complements the cinematography by working to maintain the film's slow, suffocating pace. The film is intentionally restrained, taking its time to build tension and suspense. There are moments when the editing slows almost to a crawl, allowing the audience to sit in the discomfort of the character's isolation. These moments of stillness are often followed by sudden, sharp cuts, usually to the outside world or to moments of intense danger. The editing thus alternates between these moments of emotional quiet and the jarring reality of their dangerous environment. This rhythm mirrors the emotional states of the characters, particularly Ray, whose paranoia often drives the pacing of the story. When Ray is at his most controlling, the pace becomes more deliberate, as though the film is mirroring his attempt to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. Conversely, when the characters are forced to confront the reality of their situation, the editing becomes quicker, emphasizing the urgency and panic that builds toward the film's climax. Flashbacks also play a key role in the editing, as they are slowly interwoven with the present-day events. These fragmented glimpses into the past are not immediately clear, and they build a sense of mystery that echoes the character's own uncertainty about what happened to the world. These flashbacks are not linear but fragmented, as though the characters themselves are trying to piece together the puzzle of their past and their survival. The editing often places these flashbacks in moments of high tension, slowly revealing bits of crucial information that eventually lead to the film's dramatic revelation. The disjointed nature of the flashbacks contributes to the sense of confusion and disorientation that the characters feel as they struggle to make sense of their situation. However, the most significant technical element of Hidden is its use of sound. The film's sound design is subtle yet masterful in how it creates an atmosphere of paranoia and unease. One of the most brilliant aspects of the sound design is its minimalism. For large stretches of the film, the soundtrack is almost non-existent, with only ambient noises and the occasional creaks of the shelter filling the soundscape. This silence is deafening in its own way, heightening the sense of isolation that the characters are experiencing. When sound does appear, it does so with purpose. Scratching noises outside the shelter, the faint whirring of machinery, the rustle of clothing. These minute details become amplified within the oppressive silence of the shelter, making every sound feel significant. Each creak of the shelter, each whisper of wind outside, feels like an impending threat, even if it's just the faintest sound. The film's sound design is a reflection of the characters' mental states as much as the external threats. The isolation of the shelter is underscored by the absence of sound, a contrast to the growing tension inside. As the paranoia begins to escalate, the sound design shifts, adding in subtle noises, scratching, scraping, and sometimes the soft rumblings of the creature outside. These noises are never fully explained or fully shown, which creates a sense of dread. The absence of the creature is as terrifying as its presence. The unknown threat that looms just outside becomes an auditory one, something the characters cannot escape. These sound cues also serve to pull the audience deeper into the experience, making them feel as if they are hearing the same things the characters are. In terms of the music, Hidden uses an incredibly restrained score that further enhances the film's atmosphere. The soundtrack is haunting in its spareness, with a minimalistic approach that mirrors the film's visual style. It doesn't rely on traditional horror film tropes to build tension, instead favoring eerie, ambient sounds that creep into the film at key emotional moments. When music does appear, it's often subtle, a few chords played on strings, or the faintest electronic hum. The score never overpowers the film but instead works in tandem with the sound design to support the emotional weight of the narrative. Music swells just enough to give an emotional undertone to key moments, but it never pushes too hard. This subtle approach to the score allows the audience to focus on the characters and their emotional journey, while still maintaining a sense of unease. However, the most significant technical element of Hidden is its use of sound. The film's sound design is subtle yet masterful in how it creates an atmosphere of paranoia and unease. One of the most brilliant aspects of the sound design is its minimalism. For large stretches of the film, the soundtrack is almost non-existent, with only ambient noises and the occasional creaks of the shelter filling the soundscape. This silence is deafening in its own way, heightening the sense of isolation that the characters are experiencing. When sound does appear, it does so with purpose. Scratching noises outside the shelter, the faint whirring of machinery, the rustle of clothing. These minute details become amplified within the oppressive silence of the shelter, making every sound feel significant. Each creak of the shelter, each whisper of wind outside, feels like an impending threat, even if it's just the faintest sound. The film's sound design is a reflection of the characters' mental states as much as the external threats. The isolation of the shelter is underscored by the absence of sound, a contrast to the growing tension inside. As the paranoia begins to escalate, the sound design shifts, adding in subtle noises, scratching, scraping, and sometimes the soft rumblings of the creature outside. These noises are never fully explained or fully shown, which creates a sense of dread. The absence of the creature is as terrifying as its presence. The unknown threat that looms just outside becomes an auditory one, something the characters cannot escape. These sound cues also serve to pull the audience deeper into the experience, making them feel as if they are hearing the same things the characters are. In terms of the music, Hidden uses an incredibly restrained score that further enhances the film's atmosphere. The soundtrack is haunting in its spareness, with a minimalistic approach that mirrors the film's visual style. It doesn't rely on traditional horror film tropes to build tension, instead favoring eerie, ambient sounds that creep into the film at key emotional moments. When music does appear, It's often subtle, a few chords played on strings, or the faintest electronic hum. The score never overpowers the film but instead works in tandem with the sound design to support the emotional weight of the narrative. Music swells just enough to give an emotional undertone to key moments, but it never pushes too hard. This subtle approach to the score allows the audience to focus on the characters and their emotional journey, while still maintaining a sense of unease. The Duffer Brothers' decision to keep the framing tight and the camera movements minimal is a deliberate choice to limit what the audience can see. This keeps the focus on the characters' emotional states, capturing the subtleties of their reactions in moments of tension. When the camera does move, it does so with purpose, either lingering on a character in a moment of personal crisis or slowly panning across the room to subtly imply the passage of time or the increasing danger outside. These movements are slow and deliberate, building tension gradually rather than delivering jarring jumps. This controlled approach mirrors the overall pacing of the film, which allows the suspense to build in layers rather than through abrupt, obvious moments of horror. What makes the cinematography even more effective is the interplay of light and shadow, which becomes a central visual theme throughout the film. The lighting within the shelter is often dim and harsh, with artificial sources like lamps, flashlights, and overhead bulbs creating pools of light that stand in stark contrast to the surrounding darkness. These lighting choices contribute to the overwhelming sense of isolation, suggesting that even in the shelter, the family members are alone, not just physically, but emotionally. The sparse, artificial lighting often emphasizes the starkness of the shelter, its cold metallic walls, and the absence of warmth that would otherwise offer comfort. This creates a visual tension between the supposed safety of the shelter and the emotional and psychological toll it takes on the family. The shadows, too, play an integral role in building the sense of dread. Throughout Hidden, the shadows seem to stretch and loom in a way that makes it feel as if the very walls of the shelter are closing in. There's a deliberate use of shadow to obscure the edges of the frame or to hide details that would otherwise make the world feel more expansive. At times, the light appears almost fragile, flickering, dimming, or casting long, ominous shadows that stretch across the room. These shadows often seem to act as an extension of the family's emotional turmoil, reflecting their fears and their ever-present sense of unease. The film also uses reflection as a symbolic device in its visual language. Mirrors, metal surfaces, and even glass are used throughout Hidden to create moments where characters are seen in reflection, often fragmented or distorted. This visual device reflects the fractured emotional states of the characters, particularly Ray. As his grip on reality weakens, these reflective surfaces subtly underscore his deteriorating mental state. At the same time, these mirrors and reflections suggest the idea of looking at oneself, whether through the literal act of seeing one's own face or the more metaphorical reflection of one's emotional and psychological state. The repeated use of fractured and incomplete reflections adds to the feeling of disconnection that permeates the film. Ray, Claire, and Zoe are not just trapped physically in the shelter, but emotionally within themselves as well, unable to fully connect with each other or the world outside. The editing of Hidden complements the cinematography by working to maintain the film's slow, suffocating pace. The film is intentionally restrained, taking its time to build tension and suspense. There are moments when the editing slows almost to a crawl, allowing the audience to sit in the discomfort of the character's isolation. These moments of stillness are often followed by sudden, sharp cuts, usually to the outside world or to moments of intense danger. The editing thus alternates between these moments of emotional quiet and the jarring reality of their dangerous environment. This rhythm mirrors the emotional states of the characters, particularly Ray, whose paranoia often drives the pacing of the story. When Ray is at his most controlling, the pace becomes more deliberate, as though the film is mirroring his attempt to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. Conversely, when the characters are forced to confront the reality of their situation, the editing becomes quicker, emphasizing the urgency and panic that builds toward the film's climax. Flashbacks also play a key role in the editing, as they are slowly interwoven with the present-day events. These fragmented glimpses into the past are not immediately clear, and they build a sense of mystery that echoes the character's own uncertainty about what happened to the world. These flashbacks are not linear but fragmented, as though the characters themselves are trying to piece together the puzzle of their past and their survival. The editing often places these flashbacks in moments of high tension, slowly revealing bits of crucial information that eventually lead to the film's dramatic revelation. The disjointed nature of the flashbacks contributes to the sense of confusion and disorientation that the characters feel as they struggle to make sense of their situation. However, the most significant technical element of Hidden is its use of sound. The film's sound design is subtle yet masterful in how it creates an atmosphere of paranoia and unease. One of the most brilliant aspects of the sound design is its minimalism. For large stretches of the film, the soundtrack is almost non-existent, with only ambient noises and the occasional creaks of the shelter filling the soundscape. This silence is deafening in its own way, heightening the sense of isolation that the characters are experiencing. When sound does appear, it does so with purpose. Scratching noises outside the shelter, the faint whirring of machinery, the rustle of clothing. These minute details become amplified within the oppressive silence of the shelter, making every sound feel significant. Each creak of the shelter, each whisper of wind outside, feels like an impending threat, even if it's just the faintest sound. The film's sound design is a reflection of the characters' mental states as much as the external threats. The isolation of the shelter is underscored by the absence of sound, a contrast to the growing tension inside. As the paranoia begins to escalate, the sound design shifts, adding in subtle noises, scratching, scraping, and sometimes the soft rumblings of the creature outside. These noises are never fully explained or fully shown, which creates a sense of dread. The absence of the creature is as terrifying as its presence. The unknown threat that looms just outside becomes an auditory one, something the characters cannot escape. These sound cues also serve to pull the audience deeper into the experience, making them feel as if they are hearing the same things the characters are. In terms of the music, Hidden uses an incredibly restrained score that further enhances the film's atmosphere. The soundtrack is haunting in its spareness, with a minimalistic approach that mirrors the film's visual style. It doesn't rely on traditional horror film tropes to build tension, instead favoring eerie, ambient sounds that creep into the film at key emotional moments. When music does appear, it's often subtle, a few chords played on strings, or the faintest electronic hum. The score never overpowers the film but instead works in tandem with the sound design to support the emotional weight of the narrative. Music swells just enough to give an emotional undertone to key moments, but it never pushes too hard. This subtle approach to the score allows the audience to focus on the characters and their emotional journey, while still maintaining a sense of unease. On the cultural front, Hidden became a quiet sensation, garnering a dedicated following among fans of cerebral horror and psychological thrillers. It resonated with viewers who appreciated its emotional depth and the slow-burn tension it built over the course of its runtime. The film's focus on family dynamics, survival instincts, and the breakdown of trust added a layer of complexity to the typical monster in the shadows story. As viewers, we're not only terrified of the creature lurking outside the shelter, but we're also forced to confront the emotional and psychological breakdown of the family itself. The relationship between Ray, Claire, and Zoe becomes just as tense and fraught with danger as the situation they're facing, reflecting the real-world emotional complexities that we all face when pushed to our limits. This exploration of internal versus external fear, how much of what we fear is actually outside of us, and how much is a product of our own minds, is one of the reasons Hidden remains so significant in pop culture. The film tapped into universal fears about isolation, survival, and the fragility of the human mind. The tension between what is seen and what is unseen in the film resonates in a cultural moment when people are becoming increasingly aware of the psychological toll that fear, uncertainty, and isolation can have. In a post-2015 world, where global events have created heightened anxiety, Hidden's exploration of mental fragility in the face of overwhelming terror feels as relevant as ever. Despite its modest box office performance, Hidden is a film that gained critical acclaim for its intelligence, subtlety, and emotional complexity. It received positive reviews from critics, many of whom praised the performances, particularly Alexander Skarsgård's portrayal of a father pushed to the edge of his sanity. Skarsgård's emotional depth brought a human element to the film's often bleak and isolated setting, grounding the psychological horror in relatable human emotion. The film's ability to balance emotional resonance with genre thrills is part of what makes it stand the test of time. It remains relevant not just as a horror film, but as a meditation on human nature when placed under extreme duress. The awards and milestones that Hidden received might not have been monumental in terms of global recognition, but its quiet impact in the realms of film criticism and independent cinema cannot be overstated. It garnered multiple accolades in film festivals and screenings, particularly in the psychological thriller and horror categories. It is often cited as a standout example of indie horror filmmaking, a film that achieved more with less, and that changed the landscape for future directors exploring the genre. Ultimately, what makes Hidden significant is not just its contribution to the horror genre, but its broader impact on filmmaking and cultural discourse. It demonstrated that horror doesn't need to rely on spectacle to be effective. Instead, it can delve into the psyche, pushing its characters to their limits and forcing audiences to confront their own fears. The film's blend of tension, emotional depth, and understated terror continues to resonate with viewers long after its release. Hidden is a reminder of the power of the genre to do more than just scare. It has the ability to illuminate the darkest corners of the human experience, exploring the fragile nature of survival and the terrifying psychological toll that comes with being pushed to the brink. In the years since its release, Hidden has become a film that is often discussed in the same breath as other contemporary classics of the genre, respected for its ability to combine psychological drama with the tension of a thriller. Its cultural impact is undeniable, having inspired a new generation of filmmakers to push the boundaries of what horror can be, and to explore the depths of human emotion and fear in ways that are subtle yet deeply affecting. Whether you're revisiting it or watching it for the first time, Hidden remains a quintessential example of how cinema can take something as simple as isolation and turn it into a haunting exploration of the human psyche.